to order. If we get everybody's attention, and your bill has a better chance of passing if you're not talking during this time. Anyway, we're going to call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order, and I'll ask Senator Hickman if he would do the invocation for us.
I'd be happy to. Thank you. Let us pray. Lord God, you've given us another wonderful day, Lord. You've given us a day to honor you, Lord, and we just ask you to provide us with wisdom, guidance through this committee meeting. And Lord, always help us to represent the great people of Georgia. In your son's name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. So for the committee, I sent an email to you today that has the Internal Revenue Conformance update on it. We every year match the federal government as well as we can to help out the CPAs. The software programs are waiting on it, so I try to do it as quickly as possible. We just got it over. Now, Wednesday, I was thinking about hearing it Wednesday, but Wednesday I'm not going to get into the crossover day committee thing in the morning. It's important, but I don't want to mess with that. If there's a chance to meet Wednesday afternoon, I would like to do it, or possibly even Thursday morning. But we'll go through that as soon as we can, because the taxpayers are waiting on it. It's less people are already filing taxes. It's not correct. We're running this every year. One of the reasons I did it, so you can look at your computer, is I found out that the Department of Revenue sheets I can't read. The font is so tiny. Y'all might be better at it than me, but it's just about unreadable. So I think you'll be better off if you look at it on your computer. It's color coded. Anything that's affecting us financially is marked in yellow. So I would appreciate it if y'all would try to go through that the next day or two. Senator Beach, is that related to this, or?
No.
Well,
it's not.
Okay. Well, we'll wait then and go through the bills and stuff. So we have Senator Russ Goodman is here. Now, and let me see, do you have
I just have a question. Not a question, but I would ask that you share with the committee that my ticket bill is going to be held because of the concerns of it being a revenue bill, and that's why we're not going forward with it.
Sure, it would
if you don't mind.
It would be raising taxes by the Senate, and you know, the opinion of many, including those in the House, is that a revenue bill has to start in the House. I know there's been some things where we've done stuff in finance, but not necessarily with a straight revenue increase like that. So he's certainly going to look for vehicles in the House that maybe he could put something with if he wants to. All right, thank you.
What he said.
Okay, so Senator Goodman, we've got you on the agenda here. This is Senate Bill 220. He has a substitute LC, and we're going to be looking at that, and we probably, if it's the committee's desire to pass it, need to make another change on there after we looked it over a little bit. So if you want to come forward, and you're welcome to bring your other person here. Go ahead and talk into the mic and introduce her first, so that we have the millions out there in the TV audience that want to hear
out
what
in
her
radio
name
land.
is.
So I have Miss Catherine Moore with me from the Georgia Conservancy. Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to bring this bill.
And let me interrupt before you start and just say, from my opinion, from what I've seen, there's no current fiscal impact to the state of Georgia. There could be. We could put money into it. It also allows for private donations and for federal donations, but doesn't impact us, at least at this time. That's just the opinion of the chair. So go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. And if I appear that my brains seem to be a little scrambled, they are. I just finished testimony on truck weights bill and transportation, but this bill we're working off of LC 510355S, and it's the Georgia Farmland Conservation Fund Act. This bill was actually brought to me by our former colleague, our good friend, now Commissioner of Agriculture, Tyler Harper. And so I will tell you that I learned throughout carrying this bill and throughout the learning of the program, something that I didn't know, as you all know, I've been, seventh generation farmer. Since 1970, so Georgia has 38 million acres totally, okay? Since 1974, we've lost 2.6 million acres of farmland since 1974. That's in 50 years, right? We now have 9.9 million acres of farmland total in Georgia. So in 1974, it was 12.6, 12.5. We've lost 20% of our farmland in the last 50 years. And so one thing that I think is important for this committee to understand is that the yield curve is not keeping up with the population curve. And so it's going to be more critical in the future that we do protect our farmland so that we're able to produce food and fiber for our children and grandchildren's generation. There are 29 states that already have a similar program to this. So it's SB 220, the Georgia Farmland Conservation Act. What this bill includes, it includes the creation of the program. It includes the creation of the trust fund needed because of the gratuities clause. It includes the creation of the council that will annually select the properties that participate in the program. What is the intent of the bill? The intent is to establish a purchased agricultural conservation easement program. As I said earlier, 29 other states already have PACE programs. This bill is modeled after programs already established in Texas, North Carolina, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. So what is a PACE program? A PACE program is a state-led initiative to partner with farmers who wish to protect the state's best farmland for future generations. By working with farmers seeking to voluntarily restrict their right to develop their farmland, a PACE program ensures that the best farmland for food production will stay farmable for Georgia's next generation of farmers. So why should Georgia have a PACE program, you may ask? Our agricultural industry is the largest economic driver in the state, and this will ensure that the industry's long-term viability while providing rural economic benefits and extend land production to voluntary private landowners. PACE programs coordinate with federal dollars and local matching funds to extend conservation objectives. The USDA allocates $450 million a year in matching dollars for state farmland protection programs. It matches 1-to-1 for every dollar brought to the table by locals, private entities, and the state. How do Georgia farmers benefit? Preserve rural heritage, protects Georgia's #1 economic sector, expands wildlife habitat protection, expands water quality protection, and provides small farmers with options for maintaining property. Where will the fees in the trust fund come from? Those fees will be generated through the appropriations process annually. How much funding are you seeking this year? We're not seeking any funds this year. We're just simply trying to establish the framework for the program. The Department of Agriculture will need to establish rules with further details regarding the program. How long do the easements last? These easements last in perpetuity. So that's something that whenever you were talking with a farmer and they're thinking about, possibly selling one of these easements, they're going to have to think about it. If you want a corner that's set out that you think maybe your grandchildren will want to build a house on or something like that, that you make sure that you do that going into it. What if I don't want a permanent easement? This is a voluntary program and you don't have to participate. What impact does an easement have on my taxes? The preparation costs are tax deductible for the property owner, and the value of the property is reduced to approximately 40% of its normal value for future property tax considerations due to the restrictions placed on the property. What type of properties will be eligible? This is the sort of thing that will need to be clarified and ruled by the department. We would like to keep the definition of farmland as broad as possible for inclusion in this program. The intent is to include cropland, sheds, equipment storage, etc. A good example of this would be placing a dairy in a conservation easement and converting it to cropland. What if I want to allow my children, grandchildren, their families to build houses on the land at a later date? Like I say, these are the things that you'd have to negotiate going into it. And so just walking through the bill, sections 44-10-43 on page 3, this is establishing the trust fund for state funding as previously discussed. Section 44-10-44, starting on page 4, this is defining the framework of the program. Section 44-10-45 on page 5, this is establishing the selection criteria for eligible farmland that wants to participate in the program. And section 44-10-46 on page 6, this is defining the makeup of the advisory council that will make the selections on the annual participants and council voting parameters. And Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for bringing something to my attention earlier today when we were in the chamber. It seems that in terms of the makeup of the council and who gets nominations to serve on the council, there was a mistake, and the lieutenant governor, it's listed twice there. It's just a duplicate where it says one member who operates the family farm in this state is appointed by the lieutenant governor, and that's put in there twice. That's on page 6. So, you know, obviously, if it would be to the will of the committee, I would like to strike line 4 on page 6, where it will resemble the original intent of the bill, where the lieutenant governor and the speaker of the house will both have one appointee.
So you were trying to slip in the lieutenant governor extra vote and hoping the House wouldn't catch it. Is that what the intent was there, or?
The senator knows of what he speaks.
All right. Let me ask a couple of questions here now. Well, go ahead and introduce yourself to us one more time.
Good afternoon. My name's Catherine Moore. I'm president of Georgia Conservancy, and I'll wait for questions or comment time. Thank you.
All right. So your normal farm conservation bill, I think you got to have at least 5 acres, and it's for 10 years. Tell me the differences in these, and as far as what is eligible. I think you're saying this one is in perpetuity, but as far as what's eligible for that, if you could.
Sure, I'll be happy to speak to that, and if there's something I can't answer, we've got others behind me who can. This would be a voluntary program. You've heard that mentioned already, just emphasizing that because I think it's very important. The point you raised, it would be in perpetuity. That's would be transparent from the beginning. There's not a time limit. There's not a size limit. The one limit that does exist is this is intended to assist farming families, farm property owners who are in the face of development pressure. So I just want to be real clear about that. We've got, as the senator mentioned, the loss of ag land cover in this state has been staggering. It's going to continue to be a problem for the ag industry and for families who would like to keep their farm in some type of ag production. And so these PACE programs are specifically targeted to give farming families an alternative to say, if they choose, to selling their land, an alternative to selling their land for development. So so I wouldn't worry about acreage size or anything like that.
So the acreage is smaller now. You're saying it would be taxed at 40%. Isn't that what the other one is, or I can't remember what the other conservation easement is. I don't have one of those.
When you look up something like Flipper or something like that, this is different in that you're selling the development rights for your property forever, right? And so it does decrease the value of the property. And it would be 40% of the current value, or what the 40% of the current assessment.
You couldn't develop it; it would have to stay for agriculture, but you would still own it.
Correct.
And use it. Okay,
I apologize.
And then the fund that we're talking about, is that to assist them by providing funds, or is that to just buy land up?
The eventual funding, should this program be enacted when this is passed, we hope, would be for the purchase of those development rights. The funds would be the cash source, the funding source for the purchase of those development rights from those willing property owner sellers. Is that helpful? I want to make sure I heard your question correctly. Thank you, sir.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions on this, but also our appropriations chairman's here, who's also a lawyer. So I've got a question for him before he asks his question, if we can do that. This says that it removes the provisions falling under the authority of Article 3, Section 9. If you'd walk us through that, if you can. You may not, but I'm also looking out for local governments. You know, how does this affect them as well? And we can come back to that.
Tell me where you're at, Mr. Chairman.
Well, that was just on the highlight page where it said that it removed the provisions. I'd have to go back and look up the number, but, summary I had said it removes the provisions falling under the authority of Article 3, Section 9 regarding the money collected being annually appropriated to the fund versus, each annual appropriation. So I think what we're saying is there's no automatic appropriation, but since you've got to
There-
worry about that,
There's not a strike through on here, so I mean, I'm just reading the language, so
Yeah.
I would be happy to report back to you.
and we'll
with that
get,
answer.
we'll get a statement from Senate Research or Ledge Council on that too.
And Mr. Chairman, you know, as most attorneys would have to do, they have to tell you we have to look that up because there's no way we can bill you if we don't, so.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll go to your question on this.
My question's a legal question too, and I think the senator from the sixth I may defer this one to the senator from the sixth or see if he has the same question. In law school, we learned about this thing called the rule against perpetuities, and it's mostly been extinguished. But my question, and what it basically says is we don't want people to take and bind land forever.
Mhm.
Because if they do, then it destroys some of the commercial vitality of the land. And second, who knows what's going to happen? I mean, obviously, I'm sure when they built the state capitol here, they didn't think that what would happen even to the north and heck, in a 360-degree view of here. So help me understand what first of all, how you avoid that, the public policy of you bound land forever. And second, if you're able to avoid that, is that a good thing forever?
I'll refer to some legal help here behind me to come up and assist with that question a little bit, who's also an attorney. But this is not different in the perpetuity aspect than other conservation funding mechanisms or conservation programs that exist elsewhere in the state. So just not to push back on your question at all, but just to clarify, we have other programs in our state that do aim, some are have term limits, but there's a national effort in multiple states and certainly here in Georgia to acquire easements on property for different conservation values that do exist in perpetuity. So it's not unusual in that sense. The unusual aspect of this is that this program, and eventually, if passed, some funding behind it, would focus on ag lands. We have other programs that operate here in Georgia, and I know many of you have heard of them, that are aiming to preserve forest land or certain habitats, but we don't currently have a tool in Georgia to focus on ag lands and truly recognize the value of farming and farmland, and hence that was Senator Goodman's point about the loss of ag land. So that's getting a little away from your question, but I just wanted to be clear that that would be a difference in this program than some of the others the senators may have heard about or your constituents may have participated in that we're thinking aiming to conserve wildlife habitat, riparian corridors, forest tracts, or other types of natural resource values. And this Senate Bill 220 is aiming to recognize that agricultural soils, agricultural lands have a value that is worth protecting, and this would be one tool in the toolbox to do that. So, Stacy, did you want to introduce yourself and answer any of the?
Yeah, Stacy Funderburk with the Conservation Fund. Oh, yeah. Yep, I'll just add to that it definitely, this is actually where the underlying landowner is able to hold on to the fee simple ownership. They're retiring the development rights in perpetuity, which is a common thing around the country and in Georgia as well. And
So it's like a TDR, a
Yes.
transfer development right?
Exactly, except that an independent land trust holds that and is responsible for enforcing those rights in perpetuity. So there are lots of easements held by land trusts inside the state of Georgia. We just don't have a program focused on agricultural land protection. So
Well, you would agree with me, though, it's different than FLIPA or CUVA
yes,
by
yes.
far.
Yes.
Okay.
But it is important, I think, to note that most of these lands would already be in CUVA because they're active farmland where they're in that 10-year tax reduction. Yep.
Senator, if I could elaborate on what we're seeing, and Stacy, you can speak to some of those points if you'd like, and the senators would like to hear, but we're seeing families watch the development come towards them. Not every family, not every farm property owner would be interested in this program, to be sure. But for those that are, they're faced with, this development's coming, my land has a value, gosh, I don't have a choice. There isn't a tool to me to perhaps protect this land and keep it for my children, my grandchildren, or just another farming family or farm property owner. So this would be an incentive to consider instead of selling for development. We need to advertise the program should it come to existence and so forth, but this would be an alternative where there would be a cash value coming to the property owner, obviously in turn for removing, selling some of those rights that would go in an easement to a land trust, as Mr. Funderburk just said. So it's just a really powerful tool that we don't have in our toolbox at this time. And as Senator Goodman mentioned when introducing and giving the overview of the bill, this would also allow the state of Georgia to draw down federal matching dollars, which could be very significant. There's money being left on the table now because we are not one of those states that has such a program.
All right, we appreciate the comments, and I did find the answer to the previous question. It actually isn't in the substitute, it was in the first bill, so that's why you're not seeing it. I was inadvertently given a trick question, I guess, to our appropriations chair. Apologize for that. Senator Hickman, who probably has all kinds of land in conservation easements, had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two questions. First of all, I think, Chairman, you may want to address the difference between CUBA and what we're talking about here. Two different kinds. But my more important question is, why isn't timber land included in this? Because, timberland is a crop. Timber's a crop. In order to qualify as a farmer, you can qualify as a farmer now being timberland, and also with the harvest of pine straw and all. So when I was looking at it, that's what I was wondering, why isn't timberland included in this?
If you don't mind, sir, I'll take a first stab at an answer and then ask Mr. Funderburk to join me in giving you a full answer as well. So we understand that there will be some farmlands, some farm acreage that could have timber on it. They would, as long as they're part and parcel of the larger agricultural production that's happening, that those acres could be included if the property owner wished to do so. And this is, I hate to keep using this phrase, but it's true, so I'll use it. But it would be just another tool in the conservation toolbox. We have some very healthy options for timber and forest owners in the state of Georgia, and we've never before had an option that is solely supportive of agricultural land. So we just felt that that was a productive land cover in Georgia, certainly a productive industry in the $70+ billion a year that we weren't recognizing with a conservation option. So we felt they were being left out, and PACE programs nationally are targeted, and we would draw down those federal dollars only if ag were a major part of the consideration. So we kind of felt like, while there's always more that can be done, absolutely, you're not going to hear me argue with you on that at all. We felt like ag had been left to the side.
Yeah. Actually, Chairman Goodman, I actually discussed this last night, and he shared with me the number of acres that we lost, and it blew me away, because I'm really concerned, like he is, that if we ever become dependent on the world for food, we're in a mess. So
Yes,
that's why. Thank you. Thanks for
All right,
Thank
we'll
you for
try
the
to keep
question.
moving here. Senator Albers, our vice chair, has got a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't know if this goes to either of you or the esteemed author. I understand the concept, and this makes perfect sense of why we're doing this. Help me understand, if I had 1,000 acres and I wasn't going to be able to farm it, and I thought, well, this is a great outlet for me, I want to make sure it stays farmable in the future. Does the trust actually purchase it from me? How does that work?
So if we could, and we'll tag team here.
All right.
So we'll take your 1,000 acres. It's possible that you could decide not all of your 1,000 you would want to enter into this program. So I do think that's an important.
Okay, let's use a hypothetical.
Okay.
500 of it. I want to split it in half.
Okay, yeah, and I just wanted to, you brought up a
Sure.
really good point. I wanted the committee to hear that there are options for the property owner. So you would then decide to participate in this program. You would apply, and that was some of the details in the rules that Senator Goodman mentioned. So it would have to go through, your package would have to go through the application process. If you were one of those selected, you ranked high, and there was enough funds that year, then What would next happen is that, yes, there would be a purchase of the conservation easement for your dedicated acreage, in your scenario, 500 acres.
So I don't want to get ahead of you, but
Yeah.
so we have a closing. We sit down with a great closing attorney with paper, and we fill out a closing document. And now the trust owns that land.
No,
The easement only.
Okay.
The transaction is around certain rights that would be documented in the conservation easement document, and those would be the ones that the easement would be held by the qualified land trust.
yeah, there would be a closing with you and the land trust, who is actually in the application, and they are going to bring those funds to closing. So they're essentially purchasing your development rights at closing. And then there
Okay.
will be a conservation easement between the landowner and the land trust that they are responsible for enforcing going forward.
All right, so let's say we agreed to it's $1 million. I took $1 million for my 500 acres, and I'm happy as a clam. And in 10 years from now, my kids are older. I'm like, man, we're gonna farm that land. This is fantastic. Can I farm that land and get all the proceeds from it, or how does that work?
Yes, I mean, that is a really important thing about PACE programs. And why we believe that Georgia needs one is they're specifically built with farmland in mind, and they're matching federal dollars that are also ag easements. So you can still keep it as farmland. You can figure out what infrastructure you need on site for farmland, but most typically you can't fragment it. You can't break it up. It can't become a suburb with farm in name only, essentially. So that is the thing. It can still be ag land going forward.
It sounds like a great deal. I'm thinking about going to buy some property when we get out of here. But what would prevent everybody who's got a farm not to want to apply all of their land immediately into in this project? I think Senator Goodman might want to answer that.
We were doing better when you were over there, but go
Yeah,
ahead.
I know. So what would keep somebody from wanting to do that is
Right.
that land is going to be in ag use in perpetuity. If they can still sell the land, but the land, that there's been an easement sold on that property, that it has to be in ag use in perpetuity. And that's the point of the program. Like I said, there's been 29 states that have enacted similar programs. Florida has actually put 56,000 acres, I believe, in protection. North Carolina's done 28,000 acres. So that would be the, if you thought for any reason that you were going to sell your land one day, you would, or if people that do this are going to think long and hard about it, right? I mean, they are. And I really see it as a tool, especially for families, when looking at inheritance taxes and things like that. Being able to hold on to the farm and pass it down to the next generation. If you sell this easement and you're able to pay inheritance taxes on the land, especially if it's a farm that's gotten to be a high value asset.
Thank you.
All right, and this was a late arriving bill. I'm trying to give it a hearing. We want to vet it out properly, but don't run out the clock on yourself either. So I believe it's our majority leader, Senator Anna Vitarte, had a question.
Thanks for the promotion.
I mean, caucus chairman, sorry.
Hey, I'll take it.
Seem to be.
I mean, with that, I mean, to be honest, so my folks in Polk County love this bill, in my district. Mr. Chairman, to me, at the appropriate time with the amendment and changes, I'd like to make a motion.
All right, we'll get the rest of the questions here. Senator Tiller, you were back
Thank you,
next
Mr.
again.
Chairman. Senator Goodman, I got another question.
Mhm.
This will
Now, you know that you're an attorney and I'm not, Senator, but I love you.
So if someone had 200 acres, let's put them in Berrien County,
Mhm.
they're farming blueberries,
Mhm.
and they then wanted to do a manufacturing operation to process the blueberries, can they do that? If that
Yes.
lands under this conservation easement?
If they were going to do something, if they were going to put something there, if they had a blueberry farm and they wanted to come back and build a packing shed, then they could do that. If you were a dairy farm and you wanted to come back and say build a new, I don't know what some kind of building that was related to ag production and food production on that property, they could do that. What you couldn't do though is put a Ford Motor Company plant there, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I understand where we're at in session. I'm gonna try to help you here today, but I want to talk to you more about the questions of what the limits are. Because my concern is that we bind ourselves in such a position that later on, the restrictions are so tight that you've essentially, as the state of Georgia changes and things become more important than they were in other areas, that we've actually put an area at a position that they can't recover. And I want to be really careful about that.
And the thing is it's worth remembering that you don't have to do this.
Right.
It's 100% voluntary, and you don't have to do the whole property either. You know, if you have a 1,000-acre farm, to Chairman Albert's point, if you want to take 100 acres that's on the highway that you don't want to put in this program, you don't have to do that. But the intent of the bill is to protect ag land production for future generations so that we're able to feed and clothe the.
Yeah, I told you I'm going to help you. Don't talk me out of it.
Mhm.
Thank you. It's number 11. Who sets the value for the development rights? And do they differ? I mean, is there different rights for different geographic areas, or how does that happen? And is there any competition for that? Does the conservation fund just set the value at whatever it wants to?
So there is a formula where that is determined, and you may want to speak to that. You and I spoke about that in our office in terms of how that formula works.
Yeah, so thank you for that. So again, just to emphasize, these programs nationally, and should one come to existence in Georgia, would be focused on farms under more imminent direct threat of development. And so there would be an appraisal process like there are with other conservation programs in the state, and an appraiser would determine that value. And it would be like any other land or rights, you know, it would be somewhat geographically focused and have elements of what's happening in this county versus that county. But it would be the same appraisal and review appraisal process that we see executed for a variety of different conservation programs and tools in the state. So it would not be a land trust
All right,
determining.
Senator
that.
Estevez.
Appraiser.
This is really quickly and may fall flat, but have you seen Yellowstone, the TV series?
I have seen. I know Beth. Yeah.
So the entire show would be blown up if John Dutton had just participated in this program.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right.
He would not have had to murder.
That's a reason to vote for it right there. Lower crime.
You're a very astute senator.
I'm just saying. It's
a,
literally.
Yeah.
He could have avoided all of that
That's
by
exactly
participating
right.
in this program.
Which is, it seems to me it'd be a great reason to pass the bill. I mean,
Indeed.
All right, give our Vice Chairman Albers the last word here.
It's hard to follow that one. There's been a question from a member of the audience. They're concerned that this might be leased out to the Communist Party of China. I was wondering if you could comment on that.
I believe Senator Beach is working on that.
Okay. Would it cover leases as well
But
as purchase?
I will tell you this, and I don't mean to veer, but since 2017, we have averaged 2.2 million acres of land that is transferred from American ownership to foreign ownership every year since 2017. That's 12 million acres of land. So as we move forward and we look at, you know, we're the most blessed country in the world in terms of acreage of rich farmland, and with the way our state's growing and so many other states are growing, we have to start looking at our land and our farmland more closely as far as being able to preserve it.
Well, on a serious note, then maybe that is something that Senator Beach would consider also adding leasing, you know, and all joking aside.
All right.
Thank you.
I need to ask of ACCG, since this is a first reading, you don't necessarily have to leave. Do you wish to speak? Do you have a comment? Anyone from ACCG here? No, they're waving off on it. All right. I think we've got enough questions on this. We're ready for that motion. I believe you wanted to make one. Caucus Chairman, Senator Anna Vitarte.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You got it right the first time. I'd like to make a motion to adopt the committee substitute for SB 220 LC 510355S as a motion, and then also propose one amendment per Senator Goodman to strike
So we've got to have a motion first and a second, and then we'll go back and get the amendment. So we've got a motion, I believe you seconded it. Okay, so we've got a motion on the floor, now you can offer an amendment.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll offer the amendment to strike lines 127 and 128 of this bill.
I'm gonna have a second of that. So on the amendment, we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? If not, all members can say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Now we're to the motion itself. We've got a motion and a second on that. Any further discussion from anybody? If not, everyone raise their hand that supports it. Opposed? Doesn't look like there's any. Passes unanimously. We help our friends when we can, but try to get it to us a little bit quicker next time.
Yeah, I will, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, members of the committee.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, Senator Robertson, our majority whip, couldn't be at the meeting before. He dissed us the last time we met. So he wanted to have a few minutes to talk, and then will the committee, I guess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My good friend and counterpart from Muskogee County, Senator Harbison, came to the meeting, and if you'll notice, there's only 2 signatures sponsoring this legislation. And because this legislation and the way we have proposed it only impacts consolidated governments, which myself and Chairman Harbison represent. And if you look at the legislation, and I'm reading off LC 472133, lines 30 through 33, allow for consolidated governments receiving a special local option sales tax to allocate annually 5% of those annual proceeds to be deposited for a maintenance reserve fund. And what we've experienced in Muskogee County is citizens have always been extremely supportive of the consolidated government when it comes to nanatoriums, public safety infrastructure, and I think that's where the 2 primary I remember were the special local option sales tax were used. I know during the Olympics many moons ago, citizens supported using some of that tax money to help make sure that Columbus was ready for the women's softball. And so, but what we discovered through that process, and I will point out that Muskogee County does have a property tax freeze in place. So what we discovered was getting the properties built were great, but the maintenance and maintenance of the properties were putting a strain on the consolidated government. So for several years since I've been in this office and the Dean of the Senate, I'm sure you heard it long before, the city council, mayor, and other leadership, city manager, have been asking for us to bring a proposal forth up here to allow them to allocate a certain percentage to be used for maintenance and upkeep, and that's what this legislation would do.
All right, Vice Chairman Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to my 2 good friends sitting there. Not often we're on opposite sides of an issue, but I'm concerned because every year in my 13 years of being here, some type of a bill has been brought forward to use SPLOST funds outside of their original intent for capital projects. And every time there's always been a concern that might create a slippery slope of opening them up for using for operations. So I 2 concerns. One is a maintenance reserve fund doesn't say that would just be capital purchases, that could be anything. But secondarily, the way SPLOST work, as we all know in this room, is you set out a list of projects from now over the term of that, usually 5 years, right? And people will plan accordingly, right? They know how long things are last, what buildings they want to renovate, you know, where things are in their life cycle, and then you renew those every 5 years, hopefully, if the voters think you did a good job when you put the project list forward. So I guess I don't understand why we wouldn't just use the normal process and just build that into each SPLOST that says, hey, we know coming up we want to renovate this building, this one's 25 years old, the roof is 30 years old in this one, we know we're going to have to replace it anyway in normal course and speed. So I guess that's my concern is why would we want to do it any different for this than the way we do SPLOST for everything else?
Well, my understanding is the SPOS funding can be used to build the structure in the way that it's written in the referendum as it goes out, but that the SPOS money cannot be used for ongoing maintenance of the structure. And in there lies the rub. And I know, speaking to the chairman, I know there have been creative opportunities where some have been able to move general funds in order to handle this, but apparently in the situation that myself and Senator Harbin have been, Senator Harbison have been in, that has not been the case. And the presentation to us was that the best way to handle this situation was allow them no more than 5% allocated in a reserve fund for nothing more than maintenance and upkeep of the building, not to expand the building, and not general operations of the building, not for power, water, any of those things.
And I appreciate your answer. It goes a little counter to my specific experience where SPOS projects are put out there to do things that maybe we're calling maintenance. Maintenance to me is a new roof. Maintenance to me is the wiring is bad, you're going to rewire something. That actually can be detailed on a SPOS project list. In fact, it is done that way. So I guess that's my concern, is why wouldn't we just use the SPOS process for that very reason?
So I guess if I'm hearing you, Chairman, we put the project out. 5 years later, the project's complete, and then as we move forward 10, 15 years down the road, we have the need for a new roof. Therefore, we put a new referendum in front of the citizens, asking them to allocate funding through an additional SPOS in order to take care of those issues that have incurred over a period of time.
Exactly, and I've never known a SPOS to end, ever. They always seem to go in perpetuity. So what happens is by about year 3 of that 5-year SPOS, you're building the next project list. So you're selling that in year 4 so it can be voted upon and continued the year after, right? So it's an ongoing process no matter what the SPOS happens to be.
I'm not going to offer any pushback to the committee on that. I'm just saying that myself and the chairman, longer than I have, every year we are given a list that's unanimously voted on by the city council and supported by the city manager and the mayor, asking us to push this issue forward. And I feel I think everybody knows that I'm a big proponent over being the voice of your constituents, and especially when it's city government. And that's the reason myself and the chairman brought this legislation forward.
Completely understand. I appreciate your perspective.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, as we discussed, money left over from a SPOS can be used to pay off debt, among other things. There's a few things you can do with it. So we were creative. We'd pay off the debt, and the money that was going to pay off the debt was then freed up to do other things. But paint can be part of a SPOS. I've seen that from school projects and stuff. So it has been a tough sell around here.
Well, I certainly appreciate the opportunity for hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and do we have any other questions from the committee? If not, we'll let it be the will of the committee. I'm not seeing anybody wanting to push this at the. All right, Senator Hickman.
I make a motion we approve, move forward.
We've got a second by Senator Rett. Any other discussion on it? All in favor, raise your hand. Thanks a lot, y'all. Everybody left me. All those opposed, raise your hand. I'm gonna have to go with the other county commissioner and vote no on this one. I'm just not sure we want to open this up at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I think you gave myself and Senator Harbison a great opportunity now that we can go back and explain this to the city of Columbus. And I mean it from all sincerity, that there was a hearing, and I think it was a fair and open hearing, and we greatly appreciate that.
I appreciate your
Thank you.
perspective. This meeting, having no other business this time, will be adjourned. Thank you.